Hello and welcome to What the Hey. Thank you very much for joining me to check out a video that someone suggested I react to, and that person would be Agent Yellow 11C42. So hello to you and thank you very much for the request. The content in question that I'm checking out today is titled WTF is Warhammer 40K Explained, Full Beginner's Guide, Every Major Faction, Lore/History, which was uploaded on May 3rd of 2019. The video duration is 22 minutes and 19 seconds, and the video description provides links to other social media accounts that the channel uses, timestamps for different topics in the video, as well as credits to Games Workshop. Now, the channel that is responsible for uploading and creating this video would be Luetin09, who I'll have tagged in the description of this video, and I'll also have the video that I'm reacting to linked in the description, so if you want to check out the sources, they will be there. Also, in the comment section of this video, I'll have like a little pinned comment about the different timestamps and kind of sections of this video. So if there's something specific you want to watch and listen to, what have you, that will be there to help you, hopefully. So that is all of the actual general information. For this video, I'm actually going to be taking notes because I need to learn about Warhammer, so I'm going to be taking notes the whole time, hopefully, and try to understand Warhammer better. But that is all of the actual information, so let's actually check out the video itself. Bam, boom, bop. Intense. Let's freaking go. This is like the Animus or whatever it's called in Assassin's Creed, where it's all white. Ah, war, like Warhammer. It's in the name. Let's freaking go. Bruh, there's already wars right now. Are we not done with war? What the heck? You will not be missed. So is that kind of saying, like, no one can really escape war? That's really great. That's very
Welcome
positive.
To the first in my series of primers focused on the universe of Warhammer 40,000. If you're watching this, you may well be brand new to the all-encompassing hobby we call 40k. But
I'm kind of
what is
new.
it? What's it all about, and why should you consider looking into it any further? Well, for one reason, in recent times, people's appetites have been reawakened to highly immersive TV series like Game of Thrones, or movie franchises with a decent backstory. 40k goes considerably far beyond these examples. It is one of the biggest miniature war games in the world, and features an ever-evolving story that expands in written text, video games, and of course its original and arguably most important feature, miniatures and its tabletop game. It is created and owned by Games Workshop, a UK-based company producing tabletop games and associated materials. Now, I will cover elements of 40k as briefly as I can today, but I won't skimp on detail just for the sake of time. It's as to the point as I can make it, but if you want to know more about specifics, here on my channel I've covered in detail some of the core background areas of the game, which is continuing to expand. I'll also be continuing to produce these short primers to the world of 40k, and I'll also be continuing to make the longer form content which is featured regularly here on the channel.
Isn't primer like
often
a painting
referred to
thing?
by those already consumed by Warhammer 40,000 as the hobby, 40k is not one thing to one person. It is a highly detailed narrative spanning multiple empires, from world-ending galactic campaigns to lowly individual soldier stories.
Literally just Helldivers.
Usually middle-of-the-road video games with a few standout gems. It's a hobby of addictive miniature painting and crafting, and it is a tabletop wargame now established for over 30 years. It has spawned a variety of smaller games designed to be played without acquiring a huge army. Games like
maybe not.
Necromunda and Kill Team, and these often require only say 6 to 10 pieces per side and are very accessible for new players.
The backgrounds are really
Warhammer
cool.
40,000 tabletop may require larger armies with many pieces. Now, before we come to the lore, it is worth looking at the original tabletop game, as this will give you a better understanding of just everything about it. If you've never seen or encountered a tabletop game, this is not important.
Insane.
It's actually very simple. Usually two players will engage in a battle laid out on a table at your home or a gaming venue. The area of play will be set with terrain pieces, often crafted and painted by the players, and they will alternate turns moving their miniature soldiers or vehicles, and will resolve engagements through random dice rolls according to specific rules and combinations of preset
Dungeons
unit
and
stats.
Dragons,
There
for
may or
real?
may not be a mission for one side to achieve, and these games can be highly strict
Oh, those
or
colors
open
are
to
so
player
cool.
interpretations. Players will usually paint their miniature soldiers for use on the battlefield, and these can be in a variety of factional designs and colours. Some people prefer their involvement in 40k to be focused entirely on this hobby of painting,
That seems
designing
very
and modifying these
time-consuming.
miniature units. And this part of 40k can be just as all-consuming as the lore or the tabletop.
Are those the salamander
Some may choose
people?
to split their time between each part, or
Maybe
devote
not.
all their hobby time to one piece of the whole 40k hobby, be that the lore, tabletop, or the painting designing element. Now comes the challenge for me, summarising 40k. So Warhammer 40,000 is set in the distant future, a future
space.
beset by galactic war, from a skirmishing city turf war level through to planetary conquest and system-wide campaigns fought through its space and planets.
A woman!
It is far more pessimistic than most other deep lore universes, and also regularly borders on what you would describe as space horror. Now 40k is primarily focused around humanity, which has through many thousands of years achieved an unimaginable level of technology, and then lost the majority of this zenith through a devastating war. Humanity after this ancient war was left broken and fragmented across the galaxy. It would be later reunified by one godlike individual known as the Emperor of Man,
yeah.
and he would set in motion the new order for mankind known as the Imperium of Man. But a devastating civil war known as the Horus Heresy would befall mankind.
One of his sons or
before
whatever.
the Emperor could complete his goals for humanity,
There's
and he would
Sanguinius,
instead now
I
become a
think.
living corpse enshrined on Earth or Terra. Humanity would become shattered by this civil war, and after a slow, painful recovery, it has become for the longest time a stagnant civilization. Suffocating under its own bureaucracy, the Imperium has begun making the smallest steps toward advancement in the most recent days of its history, but it still stands as a strange juxtaposition of ancient tech that is beyond the comprehension of many of its citizens. It is a weak and precarious civilization, simultaneously able to wield immense military power. Humanity itself, through thousands of years of conflict with alien races who are more often than not excessively hostile, has become a highly xenophobic race.
Of
It
course.
views almost all other races as needing to be exterminated.
Humans are
and
great,
has almost
dude.
no morals or ethics as to how this is to be achieved. The galaxy-spanning empire of humanity is essentially a totalitarian state that worships the Emperor of Man. The Imperium of Man has large, if not complete, control over its citizens, including many aspects of their lives, economy, social life, education, private lives, science, and indoctrination into its ideology. Any who are not seen to be a follower of the Emperor may and will be persecuted as heretics, and this is often largely open to
Heresy.
interpretation and leads to large-scale abuses of power and executions. The Imperium uses this deeply entrenched worship and imperial ideology to control and mobilize mass populations of its citizenry for its armies like the Imperial Guard and Imperial Fleet. It also will utilize its citizens to fulfill whatever role is needed. These roles can, and often are, fairly
Slavery.
unpleasant, especially when the rule of law is often severe and absolute. Humanity also wields in its arsenal the Emperor's greatest gift, the military sledgehammer known as the Imperial Astartes. These
Yeah,
are
the
the iconic
Astartes.
space marines, genetically
Yeah.
enhanced superhuman warriors who represent the pinnacle of human modification and military power. Their forces have access to some of the most powerful weapons and force multipliers humanity wields. Much of this tech is ancient and requires careful care and repair by specialists dedicated to retaining this critical knowledge. But as powerful as humanity is, even with its small progression in its most recent times, it still stands on the edge of annihilation by various alien races or entities. Humanity somehow has survived to this point despite being on an almost permanent risk of complete destruction and forced extinction. Within the lore, this has nearly happened on
There's like
multiple
a face in
occasions.
the space,
What
by
is
the way.
left of
Anyways.
humanity now in the Imperium of Man are the remnants of those survivors, a highly ignorant, fearful people in a fairly constant state of decay where critical technological information is often lost.
Well, they're being controlled to not learn things,
Imperium and
apparently.
humanity's primary goals are to locate lost technology from the Zenith period of mankind,
What is
known as the
Zenith?
Dark Age of Technology, otherwise referred to as the Golden Age. It also focuses upon the continued defense and expansion of its territories, and of course the extermination of all alien races, known collectively as the Xenos.
Oh, okay, so they just literally, like, hate aliens.
Because humanity has become so violently and ignorantly xenophobic in the
Of
far
course.
future, it also has no qualms about committing planetary levels of genocide. If you're not human and don't worship the Emperor, then you are the enemy, a heretic, and must be exterminated.
Bruh.
Diplomacy is almost not a thing for the Imperium, and the usual recourse is to just shoot on sight. In fairness though, there was a time where humanity had attempted a more diplomatic approach, but this over time has just disintegrated, with most of its contact with aliens resulting in some kind of conflict. It now simply believes all other life must be extinguished, or at the very least dominated and enslaved for work or experimentation. These cases
Humans are
usually
so
quite
nice.
rare.
This can't be the
There are 6
future.
other races that are seen as the enemies of humanity. Any of these factions can be played by you within the tabletop game of 40K
Orks.
or models for collecting and painting. Some players will dedicate themselves entirely to one faction, building it up, fleshing it out to the limit of their model making ability, and others may have multiple armies
The details
of
are
different
insane, dude. The Necrons. Okay, so
The
you have the
Necrons
Xenos.
are a
and
very
then
ancient race, strange
They look
creatures
like,
that appear like metallic skeletons. They're
freaking
actually
robots.
formed of living metal. They span the galaxy
Oh.
and are in a continuing state of awakening from their tombs after many thousands of years of sleep. They seek to rebuild their empire and dominate the galaxy. One of their key abilities is that of reanimation. They can reassemble themselves after death and fight on. They're also generally mindless automatons. How this came to be is another story.
Oh.
Now, Games
That's
Workshop has
great.
seen fit to recently rename some of its units, largely it seems for legal reasons, but since forever this faction has been known as the Eldar. More recently it is known as the Eldari, but basically it's the Eldar. These
The
are derived from the elves of many more fantasy games.
There's
and are
always
basically
elves,
space
dude.
elves. Despite this
Space
quite
elves.
simplistic analogy, the Eldar have a rich and tragic lore. Because of past disasters that have left the Eldar with no homeworlds to speak
Probably
of, they now
because of
travel the
humans.
galaxy in vast ships known as craft worlds. The Eldar wield powerful weapons, but are generally physically weak, and they also have immense arrogance towards other races. Their
Like
defining
humans?
feature, and to some degree their biggest flaw, is that the Eldar are very powerful when it comes to Psykers and psychic abilities drawn from the warp.
What
The
is
Dark
the
Eldar
war?
are essentially space pirates who live lives of excess and sadistic torture porn. Anyone who looks like they're about to be captured by the Dark Eldar is rarely something that you would want to contemplate, and suicide would generally be significantly preferable. A faction of many faces and contradicting goals, Chaos is as its name describes, and it
Really
originates
bad.
from the parallel dimension known as the Warp. And this dimension is a reactive plane of existence that absorbs the most powerful emotions and desires of mortal creatures. The reactive Imperium would lead to the birth of entities of godlike power, the Chaos Gods. They each focus on specific mortal desires. Khorne is the god of blood, representing war, rage, and hatred. Tzeentch is the changer representing ambition, scheming,
So bird,
conspiracy,
dude.
and sorcery. Nurgle is the plague
It's a
god,
Discord
representing
moderator,
mortality,
dude.
morbidity, and despair. And Slanesh is the god of lust, greed, excess,
course it's a
pleasure,
woman, dude.
pain, and perfection.
Women.
The continuing desires and emotions of the galaxy's inhabitants sustain these entities. However, they also reach out into the mortal realm through their manifested entities made from the warp known as demons.
Of course.
These hellish creatures are enough to send ordinary citizens insane on sight.
I would
They're
think
backed
so.
by traitors to the Imperium, the corrupted Chaos Space Marines. The gods of chaos and their agents can also infect the minds of mortals, and often cults and worshippers may spring up on planets across the Imperium. This is again one reason why the Imperium of Man is so ruthless about purging heretics. While chaos itself in the material world appears as one enemy that simply wages war, it is in fact in an internal conflict within itself. Each
Everyone
of the chaos
just hates
gods
each
fights
other,
for
dude.
domination over the others, and this occupies the majority of their focus and energy. Each god's ultimate goal is complete domination of
Over the
Imperium,
other?
a goal which seems unattainable and dangerous to their own existence were it to come to pass. Chaos is one of the most varied and pervasive forces in 40k and has many forces operating under its banner, some dedicated to a specific god, others that simply worship chaos undivided.
Duh, orcs. I like that.
Now everybody knows the Orks, right? Middle-earth and all that crap. Not these Orks. These are more Mad Max Fury Road crossed with British football hooligans, and then you're in the right ballpark.
British.
Also in space. Space Orks are likely a genetically designed species focused for hyper-violence and to be almost impossible to permanently exterminate. They are as hilarious as they are dangerous, and their entire society focuses around casual violence. The Orks though, are also probably the most sunny and optimistic of all races, strangely. Their genetic disposition sets them to see things as generally good and enjoyable, especially when it comes to fighting. And they never really see failure as a negative, because it means you just get to have another go later. They also operate more on instinct by design than learned knowledge, and their willpower becomes more powerful the more Orks are present, meaning when they are collected en masse, they can literally will things to be true by collective belief. They also have a strange ability to just cobble together vehicles and weapons from scrap. They also have no real governing structure. Leaders are chosen by progressively being better at smashing their rivals' heads in until an Ork eventually reaches the position of being a war boss. When Orks collect in huge numbers, they may launch a massive campaign of raiding and attacking anything that's not Ork by launching a warg, essentially a huge, no-holds-barred slaughter fest. Anything in the way, best dig in or get the hell out.
So they're also xenophobic. Why is
the Tau are one of the newer races and are fast learning that the galaxy is not a friendly place. The Tau operate similarly to the Orks on a more optimistic level, but that's about as far as their common ground with the Orks goes.
They look like that Squidward character
on the fringe of the Imperium and are unusual as they actively encourage other races to join their cause. They collectively follow an ideology known as the greater good. This is their guiding principle that working together is better than working against one another, as this leads to a stronger, more peaceful society. However, anybody who disagrees with this best prepare for war. To be fair though, the Tau do usually attempt significant levels of diplomacy before declaring their target a lost cause.
So they're pretty sane then.
The military is largely focused around technology and ranged combat, something often mocked and derided by their enemies. The Tau themselves are comparatively weak and use other races absorbed into their faction to fight in close quarters.
Bruh. The Tyranids, the space bugs,
are an unusual exception to all previous Xenos. They do not operate on an ideology, a political structure, or debatably a single leader. They are the most Xenos of Xenos and have begun a steady invasion of the galaxy. They are presumed to have arrived from beyond the borders of the known galaxy and are hostile in the extreme. They do not wield any technology as we would understand it, or their ships, forces and weapons are biological in origin. Tyranids are one of the most nightmarish factions within 40k. Their singular goal is biomass, that is to strip planets of all biological and mineral materials, leaving them barren, dead husks. They assault planets with extreme prejudice and will not cease their assault unless they are damaged to a point where their acquisition of biomass becomes negative to that being expended. They use all material to birth their forces on their vast bioships and recycle their own units by dissolving them back into the pool of biomass, which then they draw to create anything else they may need. They absorb the genetics of all that they encounter and use this to evolve and create more hostile and efficient creatures and biomachines to achieve their goal. They may also seed and infect planets ahead of time to often use the planet's own inhabitants against themselves when the Tyranids arrive to destroy the world.
Fair.
The Tyranids are controlled en masse by something called the hive mind. This is essentially a broadcasted collective consciousness that enables them the powerful skill of being able to operate as one, but made up of millions of individual entities across a planet.
That seems like a chaos thing.
Horrific, seemingly unstoppable, and have already wrought terrible destruction upon many others across the galaxy. Many rumour that their already devastating campaigns are only the initial scouting parties to the Milky Way galaxy, and if this is true, the Tyranids could be the ones to end everything.
Oh, that sounds banger. Why not just use them?
While not wanting to touch on the subject of psychic power too strongly in this video, many factions in 40k feature what are known as Psykers. These are essentially individuals who can wield what you might describe in other universes as magic powers. Some factions have strong Psykers and others have none, and these powers are drawn from the parallel dimension known as the Warp or the Imperium. Individuals who can use these powers do so at considerable risk, as the warp is an unstable and dangerous realm. The relationship between real space and warp space is a complicated one and can affect many aspects of life in the far future, but this is something best covered in another video.
Of course.
The takeaway for you today is that Warhammer 40,000 is a world of vast-scale warfare and complex interfactional and internal factional power struggles. 40k is by its very nature often absurd to the extreme. Sometimes this can be somewhat detrimental to its own narrative, because when everything is supersized and extreme in the extreme, suddenly everything looks kind of the same, and then it becomes arguably less impressive. However, 40k just owns its own absurdity, and it's something that you just have to roll with and suspend your disbelief. For many who are obsessed with 40k, the hyper-violent, xenophobic, genocidal nature of its occupants is largely a source for much dark humour. Most people that are into Warhammer, they don't take it too seriously, but it is also fun to take things in 40k very seriously because it contains so much detail. But simultaneously, there are many memes and pure nonsensical comedy that comes from 40k because of just how extreme it is.
Jaywalking!
Sounds Like Heresy being one such example, whereby anyone who dissents from the official line of thinking is declared a heretic and executed on the spot. It's one that I enjoy using all the time in the comments. And the key theme of 40k is purely about war. The lore is a vast, all-encompassing backdrop that stands on its own. But 40k for itself is all about the galactic wars that are unending. It's focused this way because it represents the background for a tabletop war game that is surprisingly about factional war. 40k itself operates on a fairly healthy dose of irony. Much of the events and organizations, forces and individuals often are the result of half-truths or pure indoctrination. And some of those that are held up as heroes are not what they appear to be, and as usual the context of events are very important, but many things can end up being actually quite subjective. The fact that the Imperium itself has, through its devout worship of the Emperor, now has its state religion embedded in almost everything it does, which is hilarious when you consider the Emperor of Man set out to eradicate religion from humanity entirely.
It's all very ironic.
Warhammer 40k draws from a lot of historical events and ideologies. It also borrows heavily from other settings like Dune, 2000 AD, Lovecraftian influence, obviously Tolkien, and even older texts like Milton's Paradise Lost and the Divine Comedy with Dante and the Inferno. 40k has continued to be fleshed out over time, and it shows no signs of abating. If anything,
it's so
it's
freaking
moving
complicated.
forward at a faster pace than ever. It is a universe that has consumed me for some 30 years, and I highly recommend that you allow the darkness of the far future to enter your life. You may live to regret it,
Space Wolf
but you will undoubtedly enjoy it. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, if you have a suggestion for what my next 40k primer should be, tell me in the comments. If you want to learn more about Warhammer 40,000, check out the video on the end screen to the left, or my collected playlist of content to the right. This is Luetin. I'll see you in the next one.
See you in the next one or something. Very nice. All the art's really cool. That's what I really like about it, from what I've seen anyways. The art's cool. Oh my gosh, that's scary. The eyes, dude. Spooky scary. Oh my gosh, giant dragon thing? Apparently, those are the salamander ones, I think. They're the green ones or something. Oh my gosh. Rest in peace, dude. Another woman, I think. Or man with long hair, maybe. No, it's a woman. I assume. So intense. Oh my gosh. Just intense montage of art. Let's really go. Oh, there's Horus doing his heresy stuff. Because he can't chill. There's the android dudes. Nice. Of the red scorpions. What? They're scorpions now? Okay. Now I know. They're scorpions. There's so many different characters, it's so confusing. But at the same time, it's really cool. So that's alright. That felt surprisingly fast for like 22 minutes. I mean, I know some of it wasn't all filled with talking or whatever, but I was like, oh, this is gonna be really like overwhelming to listen to and sit down for almost half an hour. But that actually went by pretty fast. And I think my main takeaway is that everyone just really wants to fight each other. Because you have humanity, or whatever, forming these different, you know, legions, factions, whatever, with different morals and systems that set them up for being like, I'm better than the other person. So then they fight based on whether or not they support the emperor, because if they don't support the emperor, then that's heresy. So then you got people fighting people, which is one thing, and that obviously never works well. But then you have all of these different alien species. I think my favorite out of the list was probably the Tau or whatever, who are actually, you know, they have some kind of sense where they're like, let's try and talk things out, but if you don't, like, agree to protect ourselves, we're gonna fight you. But apparently they're weak, so that kind of sucks. But you have all of these different groups, and I don't think it helps that everyone is just going against each other and not, like, kind of forming, you know, bonds to go towards the main issues, which I think would be chaos, like the different chaos gods or whatever, and then also the space alien bugs, the Tyranids. I think a lot of problems and issues and fighting would be solved in Warhammer if everyone kind of, you know, figured out who actually kind of agrees and kind of set differences aside to, like, fight for a couple centuries or however long and kill off the really bad people, and then maybe trickle down to, you know, eliminating each other. But everyone just really wants to fight. No one wants to chill for some reason. One of the things I'm more familiar with when it comes to Warhammer is the painting, because my boyfriend, he paints the little minifigures, you know, that takes up a lot of time, and they're very expensive. I've gone to a few stores and seen how small the figures are and then how much they cost, and it's like, bruh. But it is really cool because you have these different settings in Warhammer. Like, there's kind of a more fantasy aspect of it with, like, dragons, which I think I like more, or at least I like the idea of that more. But there's, like, different creatures you can paint, there's different vehicles, like there are tanks in this video, but I've also heard that there are motorcycles, so that's pretty cool. I like motorcycles. But the fact that there's a whole, like, hobby aspect to Warhammer, I think I understand easier. I don't really understand the concept behind the games that you can play, because I've heard about Kill Team and I've seen pictures of that, and I've started to play Dungeons and Dragons a little bit, and that confuses me because of all the dice rolling and all the numbers and having to know what attacks to use when. So all of that confuses me, but I can understand and appreciate kind of just the overall idea of, like, putting time into something and painting it and making it look good and being like, I did that. I think that's cool. However, when it comes to the more, you know, like, informational side of things and, like, all of the lore, the whole thing with the warp, I didn't know, at least I didn't think I know that I was aware of that. Like, apparently there's an opposite realm through the warp, which makes things so much more complicated. Like, no wonder you have these chaos gods coming through, because they're from somewhere entirely different, and then it's like, can, you know, humanity even go to that other place? I don't know. Another thing that confuses me is the fact that Luetin pointed it out, like, there's the Astartes, which is kind of, you know, like the Imperium's, you know, people that go out and fight in the giant freaking suits of armor. So those are the Space Marines or whatever. But I've seen pictures and I've heard the different names of the different, like, legions and factions. Like, you have these vampire-esque Astartes or whatever, Space Marines that go and, like, suck blood and they go crazy sometimes. You have yellow Space Marines. You have, like, Iron Fist Space Marines. You have all these different groups, and that's so confusing to me because I don't know how to split it up and remember who is who. Like, right now, I'm going through the Solar War, which I think is apparently the first book in the Horus Heresy series, or at least the first book that I'm starting on, and my boyfriend has it too. So I'm, like, reading through this book. I'm on, like, chapter 7. I just, read through it, and the most confusing thing to me is the fact that there are so many different names for so many different ships that are randomly mentioned, and then it's like, oh, this random, like, captain pops up and you're supposed to understand who it is, or you're going to eventually, and I can't categorize all the people and I can't remember all the things. So it's a bit overwhelming, and I just have to find a way to jam it all into my noggin to understand. Because there's the whole lore with the Emperor and basically genetically modifying basically these people into the, like, his sons, and that's, like, Horus and stuff, and, like, Sanguinius. All these different people, and they rule different parts of different planets, I guess, and, you know, that's their purpose. But it's hard to remember who's who. So that's what I'm stuck on. But in general, this video was very helpful because I do definitely feel like it broke it up into different sections that I didn't expect. Like, I didn't necessarily expect for Luetin to talk about the hobby as much as he did, but that's very, like, it's an important factor of Warhammer because that's, you know, like he said, some people only devote their time with Warhammer into painting and playing the games. But then, you know, you have the video games or, you know, you have the books and everything. So there's different aspects to it, so I like that. But then he also split it up into the lore and the basic different groups of characters. I guess you have the different aliens, and then you have humanity and how all of their world is literally horrendously structured and everyone hates each other, I guess. But like Luetin said, I think one of my favorite things about Warhammer is that the communities for it are very much so still alive and well. Like on YouTube, there's a new-ish series called Space King that's like come out from Flashgits, and originally I didn't know Flashgits made stuff about Warhammer, or at least like parodying it. But like this is a whole series, an animated one, that's basically, you know, kind of doing stuff about Warhammer. So the fact that people are creating their own series, kind of, you know, honoring Warhammer for how epic it is, I think that's great. But I think for me, it's just gonna take a hot minute to memorize who is who and what they do. Because there's all these different Primarchs and they have all these different, you know, Space Marines, Astartes that do different things and they operate on different moral systems, moral compasses, and, you know. But the big thing with Warhammer is that there's war and no one is just chilling. Everyone hates each other. That's something that I understand so far. But that essentially is the reaction video. Once again, if you want to check out the video for yourself, like aside from this, feel free, that's in the description. The channel that made it will be listed in the description. So that is it. But thank you very much for watching. Bye.